On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC 296 welterweight fight between Vicente Luque and Ian Machado Garry as part of the UFC 296 main card fight. And I'll say it right off the bat, guys, apologies for my voice. I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm playing hurt, as they say, but wanted to get this out. It's November 22nd today and wanted to give you my preview and pick. And if you've never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles. And then at the end, I'm going to give you my pick. Some of this stuff may have relevance. It may not. I'll let you guys decide that in the comments. Would love to hear your prediction after you're done watching this video. Quick tail of the tape between these two. Vicente Luque, 22-9-1. Ian Machado Garry, 13-0. 32-26, 5'11" to 6'3", 76-74. Luque with the reach advantage, Garry a little bit taller and obviously younger. We're going to start with Ian Machado Garry first and go through some interesting things with him here. He's the number 10th ranked welterweight. Like I mentioned there, he's 13-0. He's got 7 knockouts, 1 submission, and 5 decisions. Garry is 26 years old. He's 6'3" with a 74-inch reach, so he's 6 years younger and 4 inches taller than Vicente Luque. He's the former Cage Warriors welterweight champion. He's a judo black belt, and by the looks of it on Instagram, training in Brazil at Damian Maia's gym, not at Kill Cliff. Obviously, that's where Luque trains. He's got performance of the night one time against Daniel Rodriguez. Ian Garry made his amateur debut all the way in November of 2017, made his mixed martial arts debut in February of 2019, his pro debut, and made his UFC debut in November of 2021. Some notable wins for Ian Garry, who is 6-0 in the UFC, include Daniel Rodriguez and Neil Magny. He does not have any losses. He's got 3 stoppage wins in the UFC so far. Garry doesn't have a ton of fights in the UFC. Like I mentioned, just 6 fights. He hasn't had any injuries. He hasn't had any USADA issues or anything like that. So he's been pretty active since joining the UFC in 2021, fighting 6 times. It's a pretty good schedule for him. Let's look at some stats with Ian Garry. If you look at his stats here, you'll see significant strikes landed per minute, 6.67. So he does get a lot of strikes off as much as he can. His striking accuracy is at 56%. His striking defense is at 53%. So he does get hit a little bit. His takedown average is 0.67. Don't think we'll see any in this fight. His takedown defense is 69%, and his takedown accuracy is 75%. So pretty good wrestling accolades there. His sub average is 0.0. Ian Garry probably not going for the sub in this fight, but those are some interesting stats that he has there. So not a ton of stuff to talk about with Ian Garry. Like I said, he's still pretty early in his career. I did mention he did used to train at Kill Cliff. Also used to train at Leon Edwards' gym, not training there anymore either. So like I said, training in Brazil right now as he's prepping for this big fight here with Vicente Luque. And let's get into his opponent now, Vicente Luque. Right now, you can see Vicente Luque, 22-9-1. He's the number 8th ranked welterweight. He's 31 years old. He's 5'11" with a 76-inch reach, so he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage in this fight. He's got 11 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 3 decisions. He's a BJJ black belt. He trains at Kill Cliff FC full time now. If you remember in the past, he was splitting training between back home in Brazil and at Kill Cliff. He's actually moved his family over to Florida and training at Kill Cliff full time is my understanding. So that's good because that's obviously a great camp that he trains at. Luque's got performance of the night 4 times against Hader Hassan, Hector Herbina, Randy Brown, and Michael Chiesa. He's got fight of the night 4 times against Brian Barberena, Mike Perry, Stephen Thompson, and Tyron Woodley. He's tied with Stephen Thompson for the 3rd most post-fight bonuses in the UFC's welterweight division at 8. He's also tied with Thiago Alves and Li Jingliang for the 2nd most knockouts in UFC welterweight division history at 8. He's also got the 2nd most finishes in UFC welterweight division history at 13. So a lot of accolades there for the silent assassin. Luque did not have an amateur debut, went straight to the pros in June of 2009. Made his UFC debut in July of 2015. And then he's 15-5 in the UFC. He's got 13 stoppage wins. That's pretty impressive. Doesn't go to the scorecards too often. Some notable wins for Vicente Luque include Bilal Muhammad. He's the only fighter to finish Bilal Muhammad in the UFC. Very impressive there. Jalen Turner, we'll count that as well too because Jalen's obviously ranked at lightweight. I know different weight class, but still a notable win there. Tyron Woodley, the former champ, although when he fought Woodley, obviously Woodley a bit on the decline there. Michael Chiesa is a ranked welterweight. We got to count that one. And Rafa dos Anjos has been ranked. He's also a former UFC lightweight champion, so we'll count that too. Remember, a lot of people counting him out in that Luque fight. Ended up putting on a really good performance, so that's what makes this fight with Garry a little bit more intriguing. Has not had any major layoffs. So like I mentioned, joined the UFC in 2015. He's been pretty active, not any time off, no major injuries, no major USADA issues, anything like that. Luque is one of the most active fighters in the UFC's welterweight division. He's also never had any close fights. You're typically not going to have that when you're finishing most of your opponents there. So no controversial decisions or anything like that. Let's look at Luque's stats here. You can see Luque right now. Significant strikes landed per minute, 5.17, so a little bit less than Ian Garry. 52% striking accuracy, also a little bit less. His striking defense is at 52%, so he does get hit a little bit as well. Takedown average is 1.04. His takedown accuracy is at 60%. And his takedown defense is at 62%. His sub average is 0.7. So again, not really going for those submissions too often. Let's have a look at the odds right now as we sort of go through this. You can see most books having Garry almost a 3-1 favorite. Vicente Luque about a plus 200 dog. And I'm trying to remember what he was in the Dos Anjos fight. I feel like he was kind of the same way there. Actually, he was less of a dog there. So it's kind of crazy if you think about it. The Dos Anjos fight, Dos Anjos more of a vet. He was less of an underdog in that fight and against Jeff Neal as well. So that's kind of interesting too. So you can see there right now they have him about plus 163 is the average. What about on, what do we got here? Let's look on Tapology as well. As far as who people are picking, you can see 84% of people picking Ian Garry in this fight, 16% for Vicente Luque. So who am I going with in this fight? Well, not going to leave you in any more suspense. I'm going to go with Ian Machado Garry in this fight. And look, I've been critical of Garry, some of the antics he's done, even in this fight, some of the stuff he said about, Luque's post on Jesus and all that stuff. I don't think is really translated too well, but I can't lose sight of the fact that Garry is a promising fighter here. Now, how do I think Gary's going to win? I'm sure a lot of people feel like it'll be by knockout. That's not where I'm going here. I'm going Garry by decision for a couple reasons. Number one, it's only a 3-round fight. If there's a 5-round fight, maybe we could say a finish, but I don't think Luque's at that point where, he's on the decline or anything like that. I think in his last fight, it kind of showed the opposite. 67% of Luque's losses are by decision. So kind of the point I'm getting at, Luque doesn't get finished that often. 54% of Gary's wins are by KO TKO. That's the most he usually finishes by. But you got to consider that Luque has only been finished once in his career, and that was a couple fights ago against Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal's a very, very, very good fighter. Neal's, knocked out a lot of guys in that weight class. I think personally, Jeff Neal is a better fighter than Ian Garry. And if you watch my pick initially when Garry was supposed to fight Jeff Neal, I was picking Jeff Neal in that spot there. So I think it's going to be very hard for Ian Garry to knock out Vicente Luque. 38% of Gary's wins are by decision. That's the second most in his career in terms of how he finishes fights or how the fight ends up. So again, it's not a far stretch to see him go the distance. In fact, in a couple of his UFC fights, you look at it here, Gabe Green, Darian Weeks, not great competition. Neil Magny, same thing, wasn't able to finish Magny. That was one of my criticisms of Ian Garry in that fight. You could clearly see that Magny was injured. Garry was not able to put him away in that fight. So that's another reason why I don't think he'll be able to put away Vicente Luque. And let's call it like it is. I mentioned the accolades there with Vicente Luque. What's his UFC record? 15-5. He's got so much more experience as far as being in the UFC, and he's fought far better competition. I mean, I mentioned some of the names there. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Kamaru Usman, he didn't fight Usman. Luque's fought Bilal Muhammad, he fought him. That's what I meant to say. Tyron Woodley, Rafael Dos Anjos, Michael Chiesa. These are all ranked opponents. He's also fought Leon Edwards, Jeff Neal. So he's been in there with better guys. I just think that should play into this. Gary's looked great against the competition he's fought, but he's never really fought anyone as good as Vicente Luque. I think Luque is a lot better than Neil Magny, and I'd say at this point, Magny's the best opponent that Gary's fought. So that's another reason why I don't necessarily think Garry will finish him. And like I mentioned it there, I think Garry had an opportunity to finish Neil Magny in that last fight while Magny was injured, and he didn't capitalize. That to me says he just wants to get the win. And if he just wants to get the win, I don't think I see him finishing Vicente Luque. The only way I see him finishing Luque is if Luque is on some type of decline. Remember in the Jeff Neal fight, he did get finished there. There's some issues with, his head, and he had to go see a head doctor. There's a bit of a concern about him potentially fighting again, and that all got cleared. So that's maybe one thing where we could maybe see a finish here, but I think more likely Garry by decision is the way to go. I will be looking for that decision prop because again, you're going to get better value than Garry at almost a 3-1 favorite, but I'm going to go Ian Garry in this fight. I'll say it again, guys, apologies for my voice. I do not smoke. It's just a common cold. I got 2 kids. It's going to happen. Let me know your prediction here. Who are you going with? How do you think the fight goes down? Don't just want to hear a pick. I want to hear you actually say how you see the fight going down. Would love to hear from you in the comments. Let's have a cool discussion about this. And if there's any other notable fights that you want me to preview on Early Look, let me know in the comments. Always open to hearing your feedback. Just know that I typically do main events or title fights or things along those lines. So those usually do get previewed on this channel. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, @Lynch on Sports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.